We want to thank everyone for watching this program on replay, and thank you for joining us. I'm Steve, the Bookman Eisenstein, and this is the Rare Book Cafe, the first and only program of its type on Antiquarian books. And we want to thank you for joining us on Blab.im. The Rare Book Cafe is brought to you by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. My regular guest today and co-host is my good friend Thorne Donnelley of Liberty Books, Allan Smith. And a special and long-awaited guest today is Lindsay Thompson of Henry Bemis Books. I'm going to let you tell the world about who Henry Bemis is, but let me just finish this opening. Edie is going to be talking about miniature books later in the program, and as always, through the miracle of modern technology, visitors to our live show can send away text comments and messages. We'll be watching. If you have a question about a book or a collectible, give us a line on the message box. We'd be happy to tell you what you have. The pair of hands you see in the corner of each picture, Blab calls them props. If you like what we're saying, just give us some applause. We'd appreciate it. If you're new to the program, you can always be alerted about future programs on Blab or Twitter. Tell your friends about us. And finally, this program is being recorded so you and your friends can watch the replay on Blab or on the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair blog at floridabookfair.blogspot.com. That's floridabookfair.blogspot.com. Lindsay, welcome to the Rare Book Cafe.
Well, thank you, Steve. And let me hasten to reassure your longtime listeners that there's no need to adjust your sets. Regular guests will return next week.
All right, while we're talking about the Twilight Zone, I got one for you. Tell you the reason. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Henry Bemis. Go ahead, Lindsay, it's your story.
Well, when I was trying to think of what to call this venture, I wanted to come up with something that was first unused, and second, that would resonate at some level with people. And so I pillaged my way through The Great Gatsby, only to find there were already several Owl Eyes related bookstores. I suppose we all travel the same well-trodden paths when we're beginning this journey. And one day, it must have been a major holiday, because that's when the Sci-Fi Channel always reruns The Twilight Zone. There came the episode with Burgess Meredith from 1958, in which he plays a bank clerk called Henry Bemis. And really all Henry Bemis wants to do with his Coke bottle glasses is read books. He has a wife who nags him. He has a boss who nags him. Everybody nags him. Nobody wants to let him read. And in the meantime, in the background, we see headlines of threats of nuclear war, things that I can remember from my childhood growing up near Fort Bragg. And one day when he goes down into the bank vault, there's a great roar. And when he comes out, everything has been leveled. People are gone. Everything's gone. The only thing that apparently are left is plenty of stuff to eat in cans and the public library. So Henry makes his way to the library, hauling out book after book on the steps, sits down to read, and of course trips, breaks his Coke bottle glasses, and ends up crying, "It's not fair! It's not fair!" So I did a search, and I found that the Henry Bemis Books name was clear. So I thought, it's easy, it's got a good tune, it's great to dance to. I give it a 10.
And I give it a 20.
there's some collateral kind of hip stuff going on. There's a rock band called Henry Bemis. At Universal Studios parks, you can buy Henry Bemis bobblehead. So I thought, yeah, you could look it up. As I have done, anticipating a cease and desist letter.
Did I read something in the stuff that you sent me that people are writing prequels or sequels to what happened to Henry Bemis?
Well, the only one I have seen so far is in Fine Books and Collecting several years ago. They did an obituary for Henry Bemis, who lived to a great old age. They put him into his 90s and said that he died of radiation poisoning to the eyes, companioned to the last by Paris Hilton, which I thought was a bit of a grasp for popular culture, but they got more readers than I do, so who am I to say?
Maybe we'll meet him at the first intergalactic book fair again.
But Henry, I like Henry because he's something that is universally recognizable. That episode is reckoned to be one of the most, if not the top, Twilight Zone episode. And from a logo standpoint, Henry Bemis Books has 5 letters in each word. So, I just said it's a natural.
It works on so many levels. The embarrassing thing for us on this program is that none of us knew that.
Well, about one, since I went online with it, about 1 in 50 people get it, which mostly tells me that I'm getting old.
Well, but yeah, that may be what
I'm not. All of you look remarkably youthful and healthy, by the way.
It may be that it's becoming increasingly obscure. However, with TV Land and the various things that do reruns, it seems to me that there's whole generations who have had an opportunity to catch up.
I think it is still out there.
Twilight Zone. We get Twilight Zone at 5:30 in the morning for 3 episodes, and they use it as a filler in many different places, like last night, tonight, every night.
Well, I'm a non-cable TV guy, and one of the stations that I pick up over the air runs it at 11:30 every night, and it's pretty much the same rotation of episodes. So they've culled out the best of the lot.
So eventually Henry is going to come back around.
I believe Henry's best days are yet to come.
Probably.
All right. So for you Twilight Zone aficionados, what episode took place in Melville Flats?
Oh my goodness. I don't know the answer to that.
Right. The answer to that, it was the episode with Andy Devine where he got picked up by the space guys and he was the biggest liar in the world and they believed him. And they took him into outer space and he started playing his harmonica and killed them all with the noise. He was a spinner of wild tales. His name was Somerset Frisbee, and the episode was Hocus Pocus and Mr. Frisbee. I saw it the other night and took notes when I knew you would be on.
I'm so glad you clarified that. I was afraid we had moved into your personal Twilight Zone.
No, I haven't.
Twilight Zone, Lindsay, just came up. Steve always asks me to get what I find is interesting. And when you mentioned Paris Hilton, I happen to have a copy here of a book which is kind of fitting to what you're talking about. It's a paperback, which I don't usually deal with. But it is by James Hilton. It's called Lost Horizons, which might
Oh, yeah. I love that story.
That's a real reach.
I got this for free. It's in very good shape. And apparently, a first edition of this little gem is about $200-300 because it's the first. This is the third printing, unfortunately. It's the first pocketbook ever made.
Wow.
No.
That's very
I thought the first pocketbook I thought was Pearl Buck's The Good Earth.
Yeah, I just got that. You know what? I shouldn't have. I usually do reference better than that. I got that off of Abe, which tells me it probably isn't true.
No, if we're talking about pocket books,
the pocket kangaroo manufacturer.
The brand name. The brand name pocketbook, right?
It went for $6,000 in an auction years ago.
You know what? First printing, 1933.
Yeah, but I believe from Pocketbooks it's
Pocketbooks 39.
I love the story. Would you leave Shangri-La or take the gold? I think one of those I did actually read. Well, look,
fiction, I don't know.
Let me say, Lindsay, I was reading.
You are correct.
Which me?
Thorne.
What?
Wait, which one?
No, Thorne is correct. The first 10 numbered pocketbooks published in 1939 were Lost Horizon, Wake Up and Live by Dorothy Brand, Five Great Tragedies by William Shakespeare. Thorne's.
I apologize. Somewhere I got to retrace what the Good Earth was. We're losing audio and you're frozen, Alan.
Yeah, Thorne. I've got Alan frozen on me.
Dorothy.
I've lost his audio too. I guess he's.
Well, let me switch the subject. Alan, you might want to reboot. You're frozen. Lindsay, I was reading what you sent us, and in using various different methodologies of interview, I'm going to ask you the first question and the second question accordingly. What got you started in the wonderful world of rare books? But what really catches my personal fancy on this is, how did you find out about Books on the Bookshelf, and how did you find out about the Rare Book Cafe?
Well, this will come as a great disappointment, but I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
It was sometime last year. I started in business online in April of 2015. And at that point, I was hoovering up information everywhere I could find it. And somewhere along the way, I picked up some reference to the bookshelf. So I started listening. And as I mentioned I think I posted it on Facebook as a recommendation, and I would renew that even more so today. It is appointment radio for me. I have it scheduled every Saturday on my calendar.
Thank you.
What I love about the show is that I'm echoing now.
Yeah, try lowering your volume. Your microphone on your headset might be too close to you.
What I love about the show is that you have the ability to bring in everybody from somebody who just likes being around books, likes looking at them, to high-end collectors. And everybody finds a place in the listenership. Everybody learns something. You've had Matt Mean on, who's a friend of mine on Facebook that I chatted with when he first got started selling. I was talking to another friend who's a specialist in Russian Orthodox relics that I understand you've got coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And he told me today he was planning to listen in to see if you're mean to me.
Oh, never.
But what I like about the show is that it draws all those things in and that everybody finds a footprint. And so when at some point you mentioned this program, I started looking at it as well, because going back to the 90s when I was practicing law in Seattle, I've been kind of a bleeding edge tech geek. And things like this are ways to reach out to people and to find new ways to communicate. And for somebody, again, drawing from your show, anybody who watches this, from somebody who just, likes a nice array of books on their wall, to somebody who likes, is someone who is like your Irish friend who lives in a house with $500 million worth of relics and just takes you around on those tours saying, oh, by the way, this map here on the wall is worth $182 million, and I turned down a bid on it just the other day.
Yeah.
Everybody can find a place and everybody can learn something. So I was keen to be a listener, and then when you invited me to to come on the show, I thought, well, it needs to be brought down to the level of the average person now, and I'm the man to do that.
Well, then let's talk about it. What got, we got an idea, but what got you started, and what do you, let me get Allan in, hold on a second. Okay. What got you started in the rare book business? What was the moment that you said, this is what I want to do?
Allan, you missed all the good bits. You might as well go home now.
Apparently.
What got me started was that books is something I grew up around. I grew up in a series of small towns in eastern North Carolina back in the early 60s. And bookstores were unusual in those places. So when I was a kid, I was reading the labels on cereal boxes and the Charlotte Observer and pretty much anything that had print on it. When I was a little kid in Rayford, North Carolina, they had a summer reading contest that I always lost because I always insisted on trying to read things like Robinson Crusoe and Don Quixote, whereas Charlene Huff was reading all the Dr. Seuss books, and they were 12 pages each, and she turned in a list with 800 books on it. And everyone laughed and laughed. But I pressed ahead. And I was lucky, very lucky in fact, to win a series of scholarships to good schools in college and graduate school, which let me spend lots and lots of times in very good libraries, and then to live in cities like Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, which in the 80s and 90s were really the last bastions, or among the last bastions, of independent bookstores before the great scythe swept through, and now we're seeing their rebirth again. But I spent a lot of time, particularly in Portland and Seattle, in those bookstores, and in Portland in particular. If you're ever visiting in Portland, viewers, don't just go to Powell's. Go by Broadway Books, and go out to Multnomah to see Annie Bloom's books. Annie Bloom's is a wonderful bookstore in a little neighborhood I used to live in. It was a little streetcar whistle stop back 100 years ago. And Bobby Tishner, the owner, was, like me, a recovering lawyer. And I used to go in every so often, and something new would come in. I remember Mark Halprin's Winter's Tale coming out in hardcover in 1982, and I took it up to the counter and I said, Bobby, you should just knock this down 40% and sell it to me now, because in a year in the spring sale, nobody's going to buy it, and you're going to sell it to me for 40% off. It was a little ritual we had. And she would say no, and in the spring I'd buy it for 40% off. Annie Bloom's was one of the first bookstores I ran into that had a big poetry collection. And I think that is one of the things that most redeems the calling of being an independent bookseller, is selling regional books and poetry and things that the big box stores just don't find a place for in their business model. So I thought for years that, gosh, being a bookseller would be a really fun thing to do, but I had spent a long time and a lot of my parents' and other people's money training to be a lawyer. So off to be a lawyer I went. And over the 25 years that I did it, increasingly I found that I hated it. But having grown up in the time and place that I did, where you don't walk away from one of the four classic professions, I thought, well, how do you get experience as a bookseller if you haven't sold any books? So I just kept buying them, which was, I was an addict, and that was as close as I could get. I was a book groupie. When I was I lived in England in 1978 to 80, when I was in graduate school at Oxford, and I personally rebalanced the the trade inequity between the United States and Britain, buying things at Blackwell's Books in the Broad Street. And I know this is so because my mother is a retired banker, and she used to write and tell me she had gotten the visa bill, and she was hearing from the Treasury Department. So, in the pre-internet days, you ended up with lots and lots of books. And at one point, as I moved around, I was looking for places to live that had lots of blank walls, because that was good for bookcases. Windows were antithetical to bookcases.
True.
Well, to jump forward, I got out of the legal business about 10 years ago when I finally decided it was going to drive me nuts if I stayed with it much longer. And I thought, well, what would be good to do in my declining years that might actually be fun and would do something good for people other than being their cat's paw and arguing about stacks of money and how to move it around from place to place on a table. I had a divorce case once where the wife had an inexplicable yearning for her husband's chainsaw, only because she knew it would piss him off. And there I was at $100 an hour, just getting used, and it made me feel cheap. I'll confess it now.
Do you remember?
So I got out of it. Go ahead.
Do you remember the first book you sold? Was there a book that you said, "Okay, I'm going to be a seller now, not just"?
I do, and that's a graceful way of saying, when the hell are you going to get to the point here?
No.
While I was wandering around post-legal career, I ended up doing some work for the Salvation Army and a homeless shelter. And down the street was their thrift store, their flagship of several in the county. And I used to wander down there, and I discovered that, one, they had a book section, which was a nice thing. The other was that they had absolutely nothing I wanted to read. It was like a greatest hits of the 1970s. If you had a yearning for Arthur Haley or Sidney Sheldon, they were your people.
Danielle Steele, yeah.
So I chatted with some friends of mine who worked in the warehouse behind the store, and they said, well, we get boatloads of books from the library system, and they just pile up in boxes until they get too many of them, and then they get thrown away. So I managed to lie my way into the warehouse and cut open some boxes and start looking at what was there, and I discovered there was a lot of stuff that would sell. So I put together a little business plan, and I submitted it to the powers that be, and the powers that be gave me the finger, because the Salvation
This one
Army,
or that one?
this one. Well, this one.
This one. Sure.
Salvation Army is a place where nothing is ever done for the first time. God bless them; they do a lot of good work, and they could do so much more if they just paid attention sometimes. So I bullied my way into the major's office and said, "Look, I can make you a boatload of money." He said, "Oh, go good, knock yourself out." So I did, and within 6 months, books had become 35% of the sales of the entire store.
Oh, my.
Which I thought was a useful object lesson. Not enough, however, to shift me from running the homeless shelter on weekends to running books for them all the time. So I shifted up to Charlotte, where I am now, and where they have a very large warehouse and distribution center, and I found the same problem writ even larger. They get 600,000-700,000 books a year, and I was sorting those myself. And in the course, I have enormous forearms. I will not hold them up; it will shame all of you. But in the course of that, I discovered, just flipping through, there were a lot of first editions. There were a lot of autographed books. I started setting those aside, and the piles got bigger, and they started going into boxes, and then they started going into crates. And eventually, I thought, I'm going to do this in a scientific way. And in 6 months, I had $200,000 worth of books stacked up in boxes. And I put together a 50-page business plan telling them how if they just adapted their model a little bit for selling books, they could make a lot more money and do a lot more good things. The major who was in charge declined to read it. He explained to me that books were a small thing, and that if they ever became a big thing, it would be revealed first to him. I should give all of you in the Miami area a tip. He is now running the adult recovery center there. And if they have a warehouse, go immediately and start buying books in their auction, because he doesn't know what he's giving away.
Let me ask you a question, Lindsay.
Yes, sir.
First, I told you,
guys, I'm about 20 miles from Miami, and y'all have a nice day now. Bye.
We shared a similar experience. I worked for them for a while, somewhere in the 70s, doing a similar thing, but not to the extent that you did it. When you were working with them, was that recently?
Yes, this was 3 years ago.
Okay, because about that time, from what I heard, from people that I would talk to in different cities, was Goodwill now has a thing that if the book is pre-1960, it goes to a central shipping area.
Well, I know Goodwill is a different model, and they have a kind of a quota system where they've got to post a certain number of things online each week that exceed a certain value. My sense is that they still really don't have their head wrapped around the potential of rare and collectible books. And my point in the pitch that I made was that donors give these things, whether they realize what they are always or not, expecting that the value of them will be maximized. And maximizing that value sometimes means spending the money to have somebody on your staff who knows what they're looking at. My joke about the book department and the Salvation Army stores was they separate the wheat from the chaff, and they sell the chaff.
Yeah.
And they would box up all the good stuff and send it off to a number of other agencies that are nonprofits that will rebate some of the sales revenue back, basically pennies on a dollar, while marking those books up to their value as rare and collectible books and selling them, keeping that money that could have stayed local. So that was my beef with them. Friends of the Salvation Army, do not write me. I'm sorry already. But when somebody offers you, as I said to the guy in charge, even if I'm wrong by 75%, you're going to come out with $200,000 more than you had. Well, he wasn't having any of it. So to answer your question finally, my time there on the work I was doing for them was winding down, and I just boxed up several big auction bins of books that I thought were sellable and arranged to buy them in auction myself. And I thought I've got some money, I got nothing to do next, I'm going to go be a bookseller.
And that's what started it.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I just jumped in with both feet and not nearly enough money.
Well, how'd the billionaire become a millionaire? Get into the rare book business, but that's another story. Lindsay, let me give you another double question. How can people reach you? And what are some of the things that you might have in front of you that, you're offering for sale?
Well, first of all, I'm an internet business at this point. I yearn to be a street front. However, I live in one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, Charlotte, North Carolina. And every time I pick out a neighborhood I'd like to go find a store in, within 6 months, it's impossible to get or keep a lease.
Can I make a suggestion? I've made the suggestion to Matt Mina, and I've made it, I practice it. If, especially you would be able to do this in a heartbeat. Go into a themed store, whether it be a sporting goods, hunting, fishing, a restaurant, a jewelry store, something where poetry might fit in, and ask them if you can get consignment location there. Bring in one of the standard bookcases that we would use at a book show. Doesn't take up much room. Figure out what kind of split you want to do with them, whether to prefix the books at a single price or whether they can handle an inventory, whether it be as simple as a small box of index cards or whatever you might do online. And instead of trying to grab a storefront right away, if you're looking to sell and you're buying more than you have room to store and work on at the same time, consignment locations in a themed business can really do well. Just food for thought.
And it may be something I end up doing. At this stage, however, even that in Charlotte is apt to fall prey to the bulldozer. You would be astonished how quickly things disappear. And antique malls are moving further and further out, along with everything else, because Plaza Midwood, which was my ideal neighborhood here, literally has a new building going up every other week.
Are they not preserving anything?
Charlotte never has.
I guess Charlotte doesn't have anything to preserve. Huh?
Well, it did, but they embraced the New South model early on, and we have lots of plaques. We have many plaques of things that were once on locations. Last summer, one of the television stations here ran a report at the top of the broadcast about the demolition of an iconic local car dealership.
Maybe I'll find some movie posters in the wall.
Charlotte is at once filled with frustration and potential because, on the one hand, it is a banking city and it sloshes with money when it moves. And it brings in tremendous numbers of young people to fuel the beast. So there's an enormous opportunity to help younger people with resources begin to become collectors. At the same time, we are a significantly underserved city when it comes to actual bookstores. We have, I can count on one hand the number of significant independent bookstores. We have one of the big box stores with a bunch of outlets around the area, a couple of second-tier ones. But for a city of 1 million people, with the kind of economy we have, we're really kind of surprisingly low on book culture. And so I'm hoping that there's a wave out there in the middle of the ocean that's going to come along eventually here and sweep me along.
I'll get hit first. I've got to take a quick break. I'm going to put Edie on. But when I come back, Thorne, I want to talk to you. But Lindsay, I also want to see, we'd love to see some of the things, if you have things in front of you that you're offering. Give me a couple of moments. It's been 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Our viewers, website, you can just write down your website, phone number, that kind of stuff. People get in touch with you.
Basically, I can be found at Henry Bemis Books on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. I have a blog on Blogger, which is called Henry Bemis Bookseller. The easiest way to contact me is through one of those. They all have contact points. My experience with telephones is that people call me at weird hours in the middle of the night.
Okay.
But if I was going to start at one place, it would be on Facebook. There was something about the allure of 1.9 billion people that said this is a good place to start. And it has been a really good place to get started. I'm closing in on two of the longest established bookstores in Charlotte, with the number of people I have liking my page on Facebook, and they have a 40-year head start. So it's a good place to reach out to people of all kinds.
Facebook, Twitter, and
Facebook is Henry Bemis Books. Twitter is also Henry Bemis Books.
As a matter of fact, for your own information, coming up on Blogspot Live right now.
Hi, and me, I'm Edie, I'm Steve's wife.
Miss Edie, it is a pleasure to meet you.
And a pleasure to meet you, too.
Welcome.
Thank you, Allan. Hello, Thorne. I talk about miniature books, which I really, really, really like. And last week I was talking about the miniature book newsletter. And, of course, there was a Shakespeare collection. But inside is a double-page spread about what books are made of. And they were talking about a little jade book, 4 pieces of jade, that recently went to auction for $2,600. This was it at the bottom. And so I wanted to talk about where you can find miniature books. This was a little pin with a miniature book attached to it with a little chain, and it's called London. And when you open the miniature book, and inside there is an accordion
look at that.
Wow.
strip with old pictures from London. Now, I'm sure that as a kid, when you were sitting in a hot classroom, you took a piece of paper and you made the back and forth fold so that you could have a fan to take care of yourself. So this, I consider a book, whether it is or isn't, but it is made by that accordion fold. And the pictures are really quite interesting when you look at them with the magnifying glass. And I have seen the miniature books made into pins, made into earrings, and so forth. Now, this, although it's not a miniature book, is a greeting card that pops up.
A pop-up greeting card.
And there are miniature books that are pop-up books that are becoming more and more valuable as time goes on. These are little things that I get because I like them. And so the little pin I wore several times, and it's fun. And I've been to London so that I knew some of the things. And now I will give you back to my handsome, wonderful, charming husband.
Before you go, I
want
to call your attention to something that may be coming up. We're exploring it for the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair in April. And that is we're exploring having a demonstration of a 3D printer. And the 3D printer would print a 3D version of a miniature book.
Oh, wow.
It would not open up, but it's going to be just a souvenir that you can get, and it's going to be about that size. And
wonderful. Who's doing it, Allan?
We don't know that yet. We're just exploring it right now. It's an idea at the moment. But
I think it sounds, maybe Sean could help you with the paper company.
Well, it may be that he would be able to do that. I will have to.
Oh, okay. No, I have a great deal of love and confidence in his abilities. He never toots his own horn.
3D printers. 3D printers print things out as in various materials. Plastic, I understand, and there's some sort of granular material that can be used to it's basically in effect stamping out or create from a mold is creating
Boy, I hope it works out. Wouldn't I love to see it and get one?
I'm sure you would. I'm sure it'd be right up your alley. It's it falls into category of two categories that you are interested in. One is miniature books, and the other one is books that aren't books.
Objects in the shape of books, absolutely. Oh, super, super. I will look forward to hearing more about it, and I hope it comes to fruition.
An update as we go, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, here we go, Steve.
Yeah, those 3D printers have been around for a while. They're a huge business. People are manufacturing there's a lot of startups on them, manufacturing incredible things, sunglasses, whatever.
Yeah.
They're really changing the face of manufacturing. The tool and die industry is about going away because of those things.
It's one more indication of the how quickly things are moving in the technological world.
Yep.
Stephen is looking up his phone number.
No, I am looking for the Pearl Buck book, The Good Earth. I'm sorry. I want to remember. I want to know what I said, what I did wrong in that. Why I'm thinking The Good Earth went for $6,000, and it mentioned as Penguin or Pocket Books, but here it's Pocket Book number 11. Anyway.
Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back. Lindsay, do you have anything that you want to show us?
Well, I brought a few things along that might be interesting or amusing. For in the ephemera category, and I have no idea how holding things up here will work, so you'll have to guide me. This is a book by Brentanos. You could buy it in New York in the 1920s, and it is a guide to holding dinner parties, and more particularly record thereof. And what we have here is guest lists.
Oh my.
And table placements and menus from a specific address in New York City from 1927 to 1950.
Wow.
Whose book? Who's the
And I'm hoping to run that down and find out who the owners of the house were. It's a brownstone, I know that much. And it's worth about $108 million now. But I'd love to know who owned it then, and then find out who came to the party at the St. Regis in 1947. That was something that popped up unexpectedly one day. This is something I particularly like, having grown up with the Addams Family television show. This is Charles Addams' second collection of cartoons, Addams and Evil. A hardcover from 1944 with the original dust jacket. And I hope to find a good home for it at one time.
Weren't there several books in that series?
He did them all through his career. Every few years, once he really took off as a New Yorker cartoonist, he would put together another compilation. But this was really the front end of his career when he was first making his name. So I think in that way, it's a little more significant than some of what followed when they were making TV shows about him. One of the things I have found interesting is books that are books plus something. And people my age and older might remember Hendrik van Loon, a Dutch-American who was one of those people who was always on radio during the 30s and 40s. He was an intellectual on all topics and wrote big books about things like the arts. What makes this book interesting is that if you take the dust jacket off, this came out about 1939. If you take the dust jacket off and then take it apart, it becomes a map.
Oh my.
A historical map of the themes of the books that Van Loan has written about the history of the arts in Western civilization.
Oh, look at that. Isn't that wonderful?
Interesting.
And that's something truly unusual that you don't see every day.
Cool. Coincidentally, if I'm not mistaken, Madeline Bloom had an original letter and some original artwork by him on 3 programs ago.
She did.
That's right. Alexander King is somebody who was a staple on Jack Paar and some of the early 60s talk shows. He was one of those raffish raconteur types who was a high-class drug addict, and he wrote a memoir about himself called My Enemy Grows Older. And I won't explain the backstory on that, but what makes it interesting is that this is a book that came with not one
Dust jackets,
but 2 dust jackets. This is the one for his conservative readers.
Yeah.
For those who are more radical turn of mind.
Did each book come with both, or did
Yes, they come folded within each other.
Slowly down.
Wait, it's in your notes. Yeah, that's the jacket.
Lindsay, up a little bit. Up, 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 up. Perfect, right there. Oh, that's interesting.
This was his perverse radical dust jacket.
Who's the illustrator on that? Can you see an illustrator on that?
I cannot, but I will try and find that out.
There's another book. It's funny, I wrote a note about that book in your notes before, not knowing you were going to show it. But there's another book with 3 dust jackets, and I can't remember the. It's somebody who wrote under a nom de plume. It'll come back to me 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll find out by next week. But that's an interesting topic, books with multiply issued dust jackets.
This next one is my Lord God moment when I was first thinking about going into business for myself. We had a box of stuff come in, and it was just crappy. It had been in somebody's basement for decades, and it was full of mildew and cobwebs, and I didn't even want to stick my hand in it until I saw just the hint of the spine.
Uh-huh. We're not allowed to mention that book anymore.
And I said, surely it cannot be.
Line 9, page 209, sick and tired.
And it was.
Oh, wow.
When the dust jacket wore out, the previous owner cut the descriptive bits off the back and pasted them inside.
Oh, my God. Ouch.
And so we see on the back here, actually we know that this is a second printing because the J. Gatsby in the description is not a stamped capital J.
Yep.
It's a printed one. So this is from the August 1924 printing. And when I saw this, I thought, beach in Honduras, here I come.
Yeah.
But this is a useful lesson for how people can screw their heirs out of a decent retirement. Because when a bit of the pages in the front came loose, this is what the owner did to them.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
So I have one of the few, if not the only, Great Gatsby first editions, complete with colophon, that nobody wants.
Don't feel bad. Last year at the book fair, I saw an $80,000 and $125,000 copy walk home without a new buyer.
Yeah, this is another example of books that are just suffer from bad karma. Schmucker's Appeal. Samuel Schmucker was a Lutheran minister and theologian who had some fairly schismatic ideas. And this is the sort of book people would bring me when I was doing my Salvation Army dumpster diving. saying, this must be worth something, it's old. Well, what people don't realize is you can have a book that is old, and you can have a book that is rare, and you can have a book that is worthless because no one wants to read it. And so Samuel Schmucker's Appeal is the oldest book I have or have ever seen that is autographed. This is from 1828. It's a nice little book.
Did this guy have anything to do with Schmucker's jelly?
He did not, alas.
Jokingly, I asked.
We cannot say of the book as we can of the jelly that if with a name like Schmucker's, it has to be good. So here we have a rare, old, completely uninteresting autographed book. And it goes on my shelf labeled Might Have Been.
There was a famous book collector by the name of Elia Rochefort. Oak Knoll Books did a catalog on her collection. And she is the person that originated the statement, rarer than a rare book is sometimes the buyer for it. So,
well, that would be Schmucker.
Yeah.
And perhaps this one as well. This is as close as I can get to a small book today. This is a 1764 edition of Tassels' Jerusalem. Tasso was a great Renaissance poet who was much in vogue until pretty much the end of the 18th century. It was printed in France, and I suspect it was used as a copybook by someone learning a second language, probably Latin, because it is filled with notes that he took on the alternate pages. The Nona was Portuguese, at least around the 1800 period, because he notes on the foreleaf that it was his favorite book of 1805.
Oh my.
Thorne, let me ask you a question, if I may. Have you had any recent things be walking in the door?
Well, oddly enough, my first edition with a pretty decent, but it is a facsimile, but dust jacket sold yesterday. And I'm actually on my way to Virginia, to the Rare Book School, courtesy of that one.
What did you sell? You sold the facsimile DJ of a Gatsby?
Yeah, I put the facsimiles on a lot of things. Remember, I had two Gatsby first, neither one with the jacket.
Right.
I sold a Faulkner Reavers this morning, signed.
Nice.
And so that was my last 2 days. And I got one that is kind of funny that Lindsay I got a kick out of.
What did the Gatsby go for?
One was 25, one was 28.
Nice.
This is a fishing book, which is quite nice. I used to fish a lot, and it has the places for the river, the dates, the guide, the usual thing. Nothing too unusual about that, except for the fact this might fit as a companion piece to Lindsay's, because it is by Tiffany and Company.
Wow. So, gracious living in the 20s.
So that's going to come in. And for Steve, I got something that came through. It's by Grenier. It's a second edition, but the first edition was by the guy's dad, so it's a 1870 something. But what it is, it's a modern breech loading book, which is it's a publisher's binding, fairly nice. This is the first one I've seen in a long time, complete with the fold out in the middle, all the little drawings. If I can find it here somewhere, coming up here, the errata slip.
Nice.
It's really quite nice, and if you're a gun guy, I can shoot better than that, but whatever.
Black Pepper is too slow.
But no, it's a classic work on the breech loading, and so I was pleased to see this one come off the door. Not quite from Goodwill, but it was part of a collection that will be going out today. But beyond that, it's just really been more of a sales effort this week and getting ready for Rare Book School. I leave, I guess, the 10th of July for my first seminar, back for a week and then back for the second one. So as I was telling Allan, I'll be here for next weekend, but Saturday's my travel day for a couple of those weeks. So I've got to go up there.
Is the bibliography course in your menu this summer?
Yeah, the bibliography course is the second one. The first one is on, it's a course they don't offer too often. It's on publishers' bindings of the 19th century.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I personally, it was one of those things that I didn't like much because I didn't realize how beautiful they can be. After 1830, my frame of reference is really, the Georgian period, 17 to 1830 or something, which to me is great. You had Trafalgar, you had Nelson, you had limited edition books. There's no mass production. All the bindings were beautiful because they were all handmade. My family, as you guys know, got started in 1860, and man, they were cranking that bad boys out. And frankly, a lot of the 19th century stuff, I see it, it's junk. I don't want it.
I'll give you an anecdotal story, unfortunately not mine, but I heard it about, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago at the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. A couple was going to an auction. Publishers trade cloth bindings, just what you're talking about, were tied up, emphasize, tied up in piles. Yeah, there were 4 or 5 piles of them. Some of them were hollowed out books and full of real jewelry, and they did very well.
Yeah.
For some reason, they never untied them. I guess it didn't shake. Nobody noticed it.
I'm actually looking forward to the course. They don't offer it too often. They had a gentleman who got ill and had to cancel a course. It was the guy who's teaching it is actually one of the head librarians at UVA, and they brought him in. So it's a course that doesn't come up too often. And I believe there's an old thing about contempt before an investigation is a very bad idea. And I think I've had some binding courses and stuff. And one section is always the publisher's bindings. And some of them, well, this one right here is 1860. That is nice gilt on the sides.
Some of them look like Grandma Macro made on them, if you know what I'm saying.
There are publisher's bindings with the various silk. Actually, Queen Victoria, which is right after my era, loved silk-bound books. And so a lot of her books that are in the British Library now or still in the royal family are brocade and silk, which unfortunately has a shelf life of like a week and a half. It's horrible stuff.
Especially here.
It's called a buckram. I mean, that stuff, you can throw that, that stuff is beyond library children proof. That stuff's stronger than, it's bulletproof books. So I look forward to that course. The bibliography course is one that I've been skirting for years. And for some of the stuff, especially dealing with the 18th and 17th and now, and the 19th century, I really have to be told, especially some of the older books, I have to be very specific about the collation.
The only thing I can tell you is after that course, I hope you get to use the information 3 times a week, because it means good old books are coming in the store.
Yeah, well, I'm starting to get a lot of neat things coming through here, as you know. And matter of fact, I'm looking. Well, I can't really turn the camera around, but tomorrow's project is to online a lot of my 18th century books. I got a wall of them sitting over there that tomorrow is going to be doing that. But it's going to be it's the one course at the Rare Book School that actually most people that get serious do take it. Nobody particularly enjoys it till they get halfway through and they realize that it's probably the best technical course they'll ever take. And it's the only course that actually has homework. So not only are you there from 9 to 5, you get to go home, and for 3 days you don't get to play with your buddies. So it'll be the first time I'll ever be in Charlottesville studying in my little room. But I made sure that I can be
in my own little corner, in my own little room. I can be whatever the bibliography wants me to be.
A nice hotel. But this year I'm in the green, which is the lawn, which is the rotunda built by Thomas Jefferson. It has 2 long brick buildings behind it that were part of the original university from the 1830s whenever it was built. And they've converted those into dormitories for dumb people like myself. The bathroom's down the hall, and there's no air conditioning in July. So I may never come back. But
I hear that. Hear that.
I'm going to be in Charlottesville, and we'll be sharing weather about a couple hundred miles apart there. So July, and I'm sure Charlotte is just like Charlotte. It's not where you want to be.
We're in our week of 100 degrees.
I want to be a rare book ranger. I want to live a life of danger. Let me take this back to Lindsay. Lindsay, how can people reach you? Because you've shown us some things, and I'm sure you have much more. We're kind of on a time thing here. But how can people?
Henry posted that.
Okay, it's been posted.
Yeah, basically, if you go to Henry Bemis Books on Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, or Blogger, you'll find a click to contact me by any of those means. You can also email me at henrybemisbookseller@gmail.com.
And I want to thank you for everything. Being on the show, being such a loyal supporter and promoter of these shows. And more so, you send me so many leads for stories. I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate you, Henry. And Lindsay, I
feel like an honorary Florida bookseller, and so I have to mention in passing that I have a copy of Birds of Florida by Charles Bailey.
All right.
Okay.
Do you know who wrote Birds of the Caribbean?
No.
James Bond.
James Bond.
Ah.
That's where Ian Fleming got the name. It's called Birds of the Caribbean. I've sold that for about $500 once.
And in the movie, one of the James Bond movies where he's in Cuba, it's the one with the diamonds get blown into the guy's face. They use a copy of that book when he's in Cuba with a pair of binoculars under his cover as a bird watcher. More on these and other Twilight Zone things down the road. Lindsay, thanks. And let me just give a little heads up. On July 16th, I got to get my other clipboard. Henry, how would you call him? Lindsay, how would you address the reliquary gentleman? What? It's von Waldick.
Werner Himmler Hendrick.
What would his first name is Von or Vladimir? Because I've got two different listings from two different places. But anyway, what he's going to be talking about, and hopefully he'll contact you, Allan, because I gave him all the information. He's going to be talking about religious reliquaries. And it is just fascinating. And he is one of the top dealers of two in the country. And I spoke to him for about an hour and a half the other day. I can't wait to get him on those shows. He's just a phenomenal guy.
The other thing you'll want to be sure to do is ask him about some of his previous collecting. He knew Charles Bukowski has a lot of things that he got directly from him. In the last 40, 50 years, if it was interesting, he was there.
He told me about some of the lunches, dinners, and empty bottles. Yeah.
I'm pleased you got it.
And again, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Thorne. Thanks, Allan. Remember that the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is going to be April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of 2017. We hope to see you there. Allan, any closing comments?
Yes, one for Lindsay. If you would, after we stop recording, if you'd stick around for just a moment or two, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I'm going back to work. I've got some customers out there. So great, guys. Have a great weekend. And Lindsay, it's great to meet you. And I truly love the name of your store. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank
Thorne,
you.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Talk to you during the week, Thorne. Ciao. Okay. You want me to hang up, you guys?
No, just close out the program and then I'll stop the recording. Close out. Do your.
Sorry. Okay.
No.
Oh shit! What was I supposed to do? That's what I was asking.
Do the closeout of the program. Just do your last.
The audio closeout. I'm sorry, Allan. I'm sorry. That's
He's there. He'll come back.
Okay. That's about all the time we have for now. Remember, the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair is. The program, Rare Book Cafe, is sponsored by the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, 36 years in April 2017. Thank you for joining us. Okay, now, I don't want to push any buttons, so I don't click anything.